Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. We're here this evening with three venerables. So to my left, we have Bhante Sumita. To my right, Bhante Sanat Vihari. And here in the middle, you have me, Bhante Sudaso. So welcome to all the people joining in so far. Roy, Geeta, Nancy, Putrika, Jayanta, Kumu. Very much appreciated your dana today, Kumu. Rick, Amir, and Aaron, welcome to all of you. And this evening, our program is something we started recently called Sangha Roundtable, where we pick up a Dhamma topic and have that topic be discussed by a group of monks. So this evening, the topic is contemplating impermanence. So impermanence is anicca or aniccata, one of the three characteristics of all phenomena, and one of the primary methods of developing insight. So practicing vipassana, so cultivating wisdom. So as we've done in the past with this, is each one of the monks here will say a few words on the topic, and we might have some back and forth and some discussion. And this can also be an open discussion with everyone who's present. So both the people online and also the people here in person at the monastery are welcome to ask questions related to the topic of contemplating impermanence, or bring forward comments or ideas related to it that they would like discussed in more detail. So this can be an interactive event rather than a monologue. So maybe I'll start by inviting Bhante Sumita to say a few words on the topic of anicca and contemplating anicca. Please. Actually, let's start with Namo Tassa. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll pass it over to Bhante Sumita for the opening remarks. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, Bhante, if you'd like to start us off with a few words on the topic.
Hello, everyone. Most venerable members of the Mahasangha, dear friends in the Dhamma. Today at the Empty Cloud Monastery, New Jersey, we are starting a very wonderful topic. Anicca, the impermanence. Anicca is the opposite of nicca. Nicca is permanent. It's a Pali word. So according to Buddhism, every conditioned things are subject to impermanence. Yadanichang tang dukkhang, yang dukkhang tadanatta is how these three characteristics are defined in Pali Tipitaka. So if something is impermanent, subject to change, that means it is subject to suffering. Yang dukkhang tadanatta. If something is subject to suffering, that means there is no permanent entity in it, because we have no control over it. So the beginning point is anicca, the impermanence, the changeability. For example, all of us in front of you have been born here into this world as very little kids. And you never know how we change. We always think we look the same, but we have changed. Over the years, we have changed from young, small babies to kids. and then young people, oh, we are getting old. See the change. And so for those people who watch us every time, they think we are not changing. We are changing actually. Especially, as we Buddhist monks, we shave our head. So, like in a day or two, you can see our hair growing. And the other lay people, probably you don't notice in you, but we can easily notice that our hair is growing. And apart from that, every single molecule of our body, every single cell of our body is changing constantly. If you use a, a microscopic lens, you can see things are changing rapidly and dying and decaying, um, rising and decaying. This is very much a part of our system. So the Buddha said, if you actually can recognize this, identify this phenomenon of changeability, actually you have a chance to become Sotapanna. So it's really important, very important. Yeah, if someone can see this phenomenon, everything is subject to change. Everything that arises is subject to change, subject to die. That is an amazing lesson for us, and it's a door, it's a window for us to open our Dhamma eye. So I would like to say we were born here as very little kids, and when we were born alone, and then we were living with so many other people, and then we die alone too. Right? We come here uninvited, we go here also uninvited. You don't probably, some of those people who are close to us, they don't probably like us to go away, but we had to go. When the time comes, we had to go. And everything in the nature also give us an amazing, powerful message. Just look at the sun. Every single morning, the sun rises in the east. Every single evening, without failure, the sun sets in the west. And every day we see the flowers are blooming. They are beautiful, blossoming in the morning. And then maybe after a few hours or after a few days, those beautiful flowers, after radiating that fragrance, and they will die away, wither away. So we contemplate on these things. Really important lesson. For example, in traditional Buddhist countries, for example in Sri Lanka, when there is a dead body, we have, I think here in the West also you have some certain things, like we have a lamp, an oil lamp, by the side of the body. So that reflects, just like the oil lamp is the withering away after a while. The life is also like that. Then we have some flowers. The flower is definitely looking beautiful, refreshing, but they will also die away, wither away. They are really very powerful lessons, meditation subjects for all of us. Even the person who has already died, and while laying down, that person is giving us a powerful lesson. Hey, look at me, now I'm old, now I'm dead. I was not like this before. I was very pretty, beautiful, cute little baby before. Everyone loved me, and now I'm pretty cold, you know. And so this is it. You need to know that. You need to remember that. Everyone is subject to that. Everything is subject to that. So the Buddha said, I reiterate this thing. There are three massive structures in the world. I have said this before. And those are the Patavi, Sagaro, Mero, the great earth, and then the great ocean, and then the great mountain, maybe Himalayas or whatever. And all those great things are the massive structures in this world, but they are also subject to die. One day or the other, that great, profound ocean, that voluminous water will be gone for one day or the other, maybe thousands of years later, but it will be gone. You will never see a sign of that water one day. And this great mountain will be also gone one day. And then this great earth will also be gone one day. You will have no sign of existence of these three massive structures. Sometimes we live our life pretending that we are never going to die, pretending that we are everlasting, we are eternal. It's not so. Even those massive structures will be gone one day or the other. So what about us? There's nothing compared to them. We are so minor. And but yet the Buddha said, avijja, the ignorance will be with us, taking us, dragging us into this samsara, taking more and more longer in this samsaric sojourn. So remember that. And I think this topic is really important. And this is the first step of a journey. And if we try to recognize this every single moment in our life, we are subject to die, we are subject to change. That way, there is nothing for us to think, this is me, my ego, look at me. I'm not permanent, I'm not everlasting, I'm subject to die. Any single moment we never know, we are subject to die. So, no point of building our ego, no point of possessing things, no point of fighting with the others. No point of having grudges against others. Just living the life full of peace and happiness, good health. I think that will be a great beginning for a sansaric journey, and also it's this understanding will be the key to our nibbana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bante. Bante Sanatavahari, would you like to say a few words on the topic, contemplating impermanence?
Bante, so if we pay attention to experience, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, even thinking, you can notice that it's like a stream. You can't, for example, in seeing, you can't keep seeing the same thing. You can't hold on to what is currently being observed. There's always like this stream of new data, information coming in. And when also through hearing, there's a stream, a wave of information coming in. You can't hold on to that. And also with taste, right? We wish we could. I think that's the one we like the most to hold on to, but we can't. And bodily sensations and thinking too, right? That's why we forget so many things. So I think just within our own experience, if we pay attention, if we take the time to really see how seeing works and how hearing works and how tasting works, how smelling works, how touching works, how thinking works, you can see that it's ever changing. That there is no way to hold on to anything, and there is no permanence. That's the nature of perception. Even awareness, it's always in flux. There is no impermanence to be found in experience itself. And I mean, experience is the only thing that we have to go on, really. Anything outside of experience is just an inference or making some sort of conclusion based on accumulated experiences. So, sometimes we don't have to go look anywhere for impermanence. And within our own experience, every sight, every sound, every taste, every thought, every feeling, everything is itself impermanence. If we take the time to watch the body, watch the mind, we'll see impermanence in it all the time. That is the nature of being aware and knowing and perceiving and conceiving and cognition and all these different functions. Is the nature of it is to always change. So we live in this flow. We live in this stream of experiences that are always just going and going and going. And yeah, that's it, Bante.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just picking up that the thread. So with the contemplation of impermanence, it's important that it go beyond merely an intellectual concept and it become an actual experience that we're having. So it's important to view our experience through the lens of impermanence. So when directing the mind towards any experience, then to recognize that every single part of that experience is constantly changing. And one of the important ways of doing this is to first recognize that all experiences are, in each moment, a set of sensations appearing in the mind. So, for example, you might think you're looking at, well, if you're watching this remotely, you might think you're looking at a computer screen. You might think that that computer screen is basically the same now as it was a few seconds ago. But actually, that's not true. You're not looking at a computer screen. And there's no computer screen which you can say was the same as it was a few moments ago. What's actually happening is that you have a set of visual sensations which are different from the visual sensations you had a moment ago, which are different from the visual sensations you had before that, and so on. And in a moment, you're going to have different visual sensations. So every moment, there's a new set of sensations, and the old set of sensations have disappeared. And the same goes for everything in body and mind. There's actually no persistent objects anywhere in body and mind. What there is in every moment, there is the arising of a set of sensations through the 6 sense fields. So eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thought, these 6 sense domains. In each moment, there is the arising of sensation through the 6 sense domains and the cessation of those same sensations. So the appearing and disappearing of sensation through the 6 sense domains in every moment. So there's not actually any persistent object to be found anywhere. When we look at our experience, this is what we actually see. Even if you're doing something like, for example, staring at a wall. Well, you think, oh, it's a solid wall. It's just always a solid wall, and it's always the same solid wall. But actually, your experience of that wall is different moment by moment. You presume there's some kind of solid, persistent, unchanging wall outside of your body somewhere. But your actual experience of that wall is changing in every moment. And of course, in actuality, the wall is also changing slowly. It is changing. It's actually slowly disintegrating to dust. Right before our very eyes, that wall is crumbling to dust. It's just doing so very, very slowly. It might take a couple 100 years for it to actually crumble away, and possibly many hundreds of years if it's a well-built wall. But it is in fact crumbling to dust in front of our very eyes. But we don't even need to think in those long terms. We can just see in our experience right now, every moment, our experience of looking at that wall is different, changing, always new. And applying that to all of our senses. So also sensation of the body. which can be a really great way to start contemplating impermanence. So start by focusing on feeling your body. And as you pay attention to your body, you'll recognize that the sensations of the body are constantly changing. There's nothing in the body that remains the same, even for a moment. So again, you normally we think of our body as a persistent, solid object. But when you pay close attention to your experience, you realize that's not your experience and it never has been. You have never experienced a solid, persistent, unchanging body. What you've only ever experienced is a bunch of physical sensations that constantly appear and disappear. That's what you've actually been experiencing all this time. And that's what you're experiencing right now. So there's actually nothing anywhere in your experience whatsoever that you can point to and say that is always present and always unchanging. Even consciousness itself is constantly changing. The state of awareness, the state of mind that we have is constantly changing. The feeling of awareness is constantly changing. Its quality, its character is always changing. So looking at our experience in this way, it can actually be a little bit disorienting. It's a bit like suddenly realizing you're free falling through empty space. When you just a moment ago you thought you were sitting on solid ground, but actually you're still sitting on solid ground, so to speak. It's just you've realized that there's no such thing as solid ground. There's no such thing as a solid body that could sit on solid ground, even if there was such a thing as solid ground. And yet, nonetheless, we have conventional experiences of moving through the world, of a body moving through the world. So we still maintain a clear awareness of that conventional reality, but we recognize that conventional reality is a fabrication in our mind. It's a construct. It's a concept that we use in order to function in the world, but that concept has no relationship to actual reality. Our actual experience of reality is one of never-ending constant change, right down to the most minute particle of experience. Every single aspect of our experience is changing every single moment. So paying attention to this, actually feeling it, so taking it beyond the level of a concept or an idea and bringing it to the level of a direct experience. And this is dependent to some degree on how strong your concentration is. If your concentration is very weak, then we'll tend to keep snapping back into our habitual way of relating to the world, our habitual way of relating to concepts of solid, stable, substantial, persistent objects. So it's necessary to develop a certain degree of samadhi, a certain degree of concentration, before one can get much practice, much progress out of practicing the recognition of impermanence. The other thing is that if we're not used to practicing renunciation, so letting go, then we can sometimes experience fear. When developing the perception of impermanence, we can experience fear. And in particular, what we're experiencing is the fear of loss, because we think we're losing something. We think we're losing something solid that we used to have. But actually, you never had anything solid because there never was anything solid that you could have in the first place. So when we're used to practicing renunciation, when we're used to letting go, then you can let go of all things and there's no problem. You can let go of the illusion of solid, persistent objects because we're used to letting go of things anyway. But if you're used to holding on, then the experience of there being nothing you can hold on to might be frightening. It might be terrifying, in fact. So this is also why renunciation and letting go are such a critical part of Buddhist practice. If you can't let go of simple things, then how can you possibly let go of all things? But when we practice the perception of impermanence with courage, with the attitude of renunciation and equanimity, then what arises is a tremendous sense of freedom, a sense of ease. Kind of like if you've been locked in a very small room for a very long time. And then one day you realize that the walls have disappeared. The walls of that tiny room you've been locked in have suddenly disappeared. And you're actually in the midst of a vast open field, surrounded by open air, clean open air. It's actually this wonderful feeling of relief and spaciousness. Well, it's actually the same way. Our normal claustrophobic concept of the world as being composed of solid, persistent objects is like being locked in a very small, very cramped room. So a very uncomfortable experience. And it's also utterly delusional. Whereas when we make progress with the direct experience of impermanence, then it's like the walls of that room dissolving. And there's this feeling of spaciousness, a spaciousness and serenity which we can relax into, a sense of carefree serenity, of not being constricted in any way. And it's also good to point out, as Bhante Sumita mentioned, that the perception of impermanence, it's not just some trippy mind game that we play. It's something that leads to awakening, something that leads to enlightenment. There's actually many suttas where the Buddha says that if you contemplate, if you have strong samadhi and you contemplate impermanence, then that can bring you all the way to full enlightenment. So just that much is enough. Develop strong samadhi and perceive impermanence, and you can attain enlightenment. It's actually all you need. So practicing the perception of impermanence is a very valuable way of helping us make progress towards the final goal of awakening. So these are a few more words on the subject. And we actually have a question from Gita. So Venerables, would either of you like to say some more words on the topic? Or shall we move on to discussing some of the questions that people have brought up?
I think we can discuss more through the questions.
Okay. So Gita asks, how can one become mindful of impermanence using noble wisdom in our daily activities, in all of our daily activities? Bhante Sumita, would you like to say a few words on this?
Daily activities, I think it's very good if we can contemplate on daily activities, because sometimes people think like meditation is just secluded from the rest of the world. You hide away from the world and then you meditate in the jungles and all that stuff. It's actually the application that's important. Maybe it's important for you to practice separately in a lonely place or something where you get least disturbance, and then you learn the technique and you have to live with this world, where all these hullabaloos happen. So we can't really run away from that society too. So it's really important that when we know those things, let's say the example of impermanence, even the pain itself that you undergo when you meditate, you will notice, if you try to recognize where is the pain coming from. You figure it out, like at the beginning it's like, okay, the pain in the lower back, it's really bothering me, and then you try to pinpoint where exactly is the pain. Then you see like the pain is also running, jumping here and there. It's not even permanent. Even the pain is not permanent. So after a while it will go away too. And then the Buddha said, actually, you try to see, is the pain yours? Is the pain you? And that way you actually think, pain is not me, pain is not mine, pain is not myself, and pain is not permanent, pain is also subject to change. And so that way it's easier to understand that everything is subject to change. And sometimes you will feel like in day-to-day life, you are so happy sometimes, there are some occasions where you feel so happy, and so you try to celebrate that. And sometimes it's blown out of proportion. You go to like alcohol or some other parties or things like that can happen, and then eventually that jubilation can lead to frustration or sadness or maybe even an unfortunate situation. So don't go to that limit. Just be mindful that that happiness itself is not permanent. Same thing with the pain. When you undergo some suffering in life, don't think it is permanent. By recognizing itself will be really, really serious. Sometimes people even commit suicide. They can't really bear the pain due to some reason or the other. Maybe like relationship problems, or maybe in day-to-day life, like you work with your co-workers and there will be some issues, and all these things are subject to change. And it's for you to understand that everything is subject to change. The more you think of it, the more you are aware of it, the less problematic it becomes, and you feel much more comfortable and confident in your day-to-day life. So this meditation theory, when you apply it in your day-to-day life, in real life situations, it will be really, really helpful in day-to-day life. So don't panic when there is something unfortunate happen. All these sufferings are integral part of our life. Jati dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadhi dukkha, maranam dukkha, appiyehi sampayogo dukkha, piyehi vipayogo dukkha, yam piccana labati tampi dukkha, sankittena panchupadana kanda dukkha. This is how it is explained, the suffering, truth of suffering, the birth is suffering. And then the decay is suffering. We don't want to grow old, right? You want to be always looking good. So sometimes you want to camouflage with these cosmetics or makeup or all these things, but you can't do it forever. And it'll happen. And then the sickness will also come to you from time to time, no matter how much you try, what vitamins you take, things will happen. You will get sick. And so it's part of our life. We can't really run away from that. If you recognize it, accept it, I think it will be less problematic for you. And sometimes in life, you will have the association that you don't like. You don't like some people in your around, always problematic. When you see them, you have like grumpy face. And at your place of work or at your home or wherever, it can happen to us. So there are some unfriendly people around. We can run away from them too. Sometimes it happens to us. This is part of our life. So, and then there are some pleasant people in our life. You really want to be so dear to them, so close to them, but you can do it forever too, because they also go away. Sometimes they die, or sometimes they go away to another place, maybe another state. You really want to be with them. It doesn't happen too. So everything is subject to change. And all these things will help you become better and confident, and also maintain your inner peace.
Bhante Sanatavahari, would you like to say a few words on the subject?
I think Bante did a great job.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one thing I would add to that is to also watch your mind, to watch the states of your mind, the emotions and feelings in the mind, and the thoughts and images and ideas in the mind, and recognize that all of that also is constantly changing. This is actually very helpful in meditation, by the way. If you feel like you can't stop thinking, if you've got a lot of runaway, restless thoughts in your meditation, well, ask yourself, are these thoughts permanent? Pay close attention to those thoughts. Are they actually permanent? Or are they constantly changing? Are they always there? Or are they sometimes there and sometimes not there? So look more closely at it and recognize the impermanence of all mental formations, of all mental objects, of all mental activities. And you'll also start to discover that there's moments of stillness and serenity in between the moments of restlessness. There's moments of silence in between the moments of mental chatter. There's moments of peace and clarity. If you pay attention to the impermanence of mental activity, then you'll also start to discover the moments of peace. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says that we should observe arising and also ceasing. In other words, we tend to be so focused on the arising of thoughts that we don't pay attention to the cessation of thoughts. We're so fixated on like, oh, I can't meditate, my mind is so noisy and full of random thinking, that we don't realize that actually those thoughts are disappearing every single moment. And that there are moments when the thoughts disappear and nothing arises to replace it. Maybe just for a few fractions of a second, but maybe for longer. But however long it is, we can start to notice those moments of cessation. So this is one part of the practice of contemplating impermanence, is to notice both arising and ceasing, not to fixate on only the arising as we so often do, but to also notice the ceasing of phenomena, ceasing of thoughts and emotions. And this is also, again, it's quite important if we are having some kind of seemingly persistent emotion in the mind. So maybe you're feeling really sad or depressed or anxious. Well, pay close attention to that emotion and watch. Ask yourself, is it permanent or is it changing? And of course, you'll see it's changing because that's the way of all things. All things are always changing. So watch as it changes. Pay attention to the changingness of that emotion or that mind state. And you'll realize, as you watch it in this way, you'll realize that it does not control you and it does not define you. That there is a you which is watching the changing emotion. You are not the emotion. The emotion does not define you. Rather, the constantly changing emotion is something that you're watching, something that is occurring within awareness, within the domain of consciousness. So this can give us a tremendous amount of peace, because through observing the impermanence of thoughts and emotions, then we become free from those thoughts and emotions. So even when they're present, they do not disturb us. So there's a common misunderstanding that you must silence your mind in order to enter samadhi. You must force your mind to be silent in order to enter concentration. But this actually isn't quite true. Rather, recognizing that the thoughts and emotions passing through the mind do not need to distract you is sufficient for entering samadhi. Because then the thoughts and emotions will no longer hold your attention. They'll just pass through the mind without grabbing your attention. So just watching as they pass through the mind, but not taking any interest in them. Just see them as meaningless, transient phenomena. Again, like if you're lying on your back, staring up at the sky, just watching clouds drift through the sky. But you know that there's no significance to any one cloud. It's just a cloud drifting through. Ultimately, what you're doing is watching the sky. So in the same, there's all these thoughts and emotions drifting through the mind, but they're constantly changing, and ultimately they're not important. And if you practice in this way, then the mind will enter into concentration much more quickly than if you're trying to force all the thoughts and emotions to cease. So rather just recognizing that they are impermanent and that they don't control you. That already is enough for the mind to enter samadhi. So that's actually all we have from online. Does anybody have any questions or comments or ideas about how they would like this conversation to develop, where they'd like it to go from here? Or Venerables, would either of you like to say some more? on anything related to the topic.
I'd like to add one more thing, like when you do meditation. Let's say like you meditate on Anapanasati. In this world there is one thing that is not changing. What is it? Changing. Everything else is changing. So every single breath we take has a unique identity. Everything is different from each other. If you pay close attention to them, they are all different. They are all changing. Sometimes it is long breath, sometimes it is short breath. So it is changing. And then if you pay more attention to that, the frequency, the duration, and the volume, and also the heat and the warmth, there are many details that if we can go through, even the breath that we take from birth to death, we are changing. It's a great example for our day-to-day life to see how things are changing. Everything is changing. And then the Buddha said, anicca vata sankhara upada vaya dhammino upajjitva nirujjanti tesang upasamo sukho. So all conditioned things are subject to change, anicca, impermanent. And then upada vaya dhammino, everything that arises is subject to decay. Upada vaya dhammino. Upajjitva nirujjanti, they arise and then they cease. And tesang upasamo sukho, the reconciliation of that is the greatest happiness, the peace, and that is the Nibbana. So I think if we pay attention to any of these things, can be really helpful for your day-to-day life and also your day-to-day meditation. We have meditations, contemplation on death, contemplation on foulness of the body. So all these are really also very helpful. And everything, if you think, okay, everything is changing, everything is not permanent, but does that mean that we should be always pessimistic? Everything is changing, everything is, so we should let it go, like we should have no hold on to that. But through these, panchaskanda, or what you call five aggregates, these very tools that we have, whatever possessions we have to use these things also to get rid of them. And so by thinking of that impermanence, and then anicca and the dukkha, the suffering, and also the anatta, the no soul, then through this understanding, through our body, nama rupa, and all these things, we have to also come out of this. We are kind of trapped in a whirlpool. We are trapped in a whirlpool. We have to decode that. The only way is to come out of it is through this body and the five aggregates that we have. It's like we have fallen into a well. The only way out is the opening, the up, and so we have to come out of it. And using the resources that we have, we can do that too. So by constantly being mindful about what we undergo, can be really helpful. Yeah, sometimes life is so full of glorious uncertainties, ups and downs, sometimes happy, sometimes sad. It is said the 8 vicissitudes, labha, alabha, ayasa, yasa, ninda, prasansa, sukha, dukkha, they are the two opposite. We have, sometimes we gain, sometimes we lose. And that is labha, alabha. Ayasa, sometimes people appreciate us, sometimes people blame us. And then, ninda, prasansa, like that is. And then sometimes we have good name and fame, sometimes not so. and appreciation and the other things. And then, flowers and brickbats, we have to accept in our life alike. And then sukha dukkha, the comfort sometime, and then also the suffering. So these are, again, we have that. And maybe some people who have done so much good in their samsara, maybe they get less, but still they have it. We had it actually during this pandemic. Those people who thought that they would be like unassailable, they would be invincible, we knew that. Those leaders, those big people, they thought they would be untouchable, but they were also affected. We knew that. So things can happen to anyone, no matter how much you try. It's not going to, escape you. So we need to know that, and that way, so much better and comfortable. Not only me, that everyone else is suffering. Not only me, that everyone else is dying. Yeah. What the Buddha told the lesson to Kisa Gotami, who was so ignorant, and she thought her dead son. Do you know the story of Kisa Gotami? She lost a baby, and she thought the only son she had, and she thought he's not dead. She was so covered, shielded with that ignorance. She thought that powerful attachment to the baby did not allow her to open her eyes. So she thought he is not dead. Everyone said he is dead. Just, bury him or do something. Get rid of him. Now it's a dead body. She said, no, he's not dead. He is still alive. He is only sick. So somebody, a wise man, finally directed her to the Buddha. Okay, there is a doctor, good one. You go meet him. And then she went there to meet the Buddha with the dead body of her son. The Buddha said, she said to the Buddha, my son is sick, can you please help me? The Buddha said, no, he's dead. Buddha didn't say that. He said, okay, I can help you if you bring me some medicine. Okay, what do you want? I need some mustard seeds. A bunch of mustard seeds from a home where nobody has died. So she said, no, she was very happy. Finally, Buddha said yes. Somebody said yes. So, the Buddha used that very powerful technique. And she went from one house to another, knocking at each door, asking for mustard seed. And everyone brought her mustard seed. And then when she asked, did somebody die here? Oh, yes, my grandfather died. My grandmother died. My mother died. My father died. My brother died. My sister died. My uncle, aunt, somebody or the other died in that home. So she eventually, slowly opened her eyes. She realized not only my son that is dead, everyone is dead in the world is subject to death. Then she also started opening her senses. She smelled the decomposed body. Eventually she realized my son is really dead. She dumped her body, the son's body, came to the Buddha and asked the Buddha to ordain her. And if you remember, early morning we chanted Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami was foremost among the ones who wear the coarse robes. Yeah, that's the story of Kisa Gotami. Yeah, these are really powerful examples of the impermanence.
Thank you, Bante. So Dulani asked if we could talk more about metta, loving kindness. It's not really on the topic. The topic is contemplating impermanence. But one way that I could relate this is, loving kindness or metta is the opposite of ill will. So the opposite of wanting other people to suffer. So when the mind is full of anger or hatred or resentment or ill will, sometimes it's difficult to just go directly to experiencing loving kindness. Sometimes it's too much of a jump. So one way to start actually is to contemplate the impermanence of that negative mind state. So you're sitting there thinking like, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. Stop and actually look at that feeling of hatred. It's like, now, is this feeling of hatred permanent? Or is it changing? And you'll see that it's changing. And you look and you see, is it always here? Or is it sometimes absent? And you'll see, oh, it's sometimes here and it's sometimes absent. Sometimes strong, sometimes weak. Sometimes it disappears entirely. So, and in those moments when it's gone, does that feel better or does it feel worse? And you'll notice that when the hatred is weaker, then you feel better. And when the hatred disappears, that feels really good, feels really pleasant. So in this way, you can start to bring the mind towards non-ill will, which is not quite yet loving kindness, but it's a big step in the right direction. So recognizing the impermanence of hostile mind states can help you start to let go of them so that it's easier to practice metta, it's easier to practice loving kindness. Another way this is related, so in the Attikanagara Sutta, which is one place where the Buddha talks about using samadhi as a basis for practicing the perception of impermanence. The Buddha, he speaks about using jhana states, so strong samadhi states, as a basis for practicing impermanence and attaining awakening. But he also says that one can immerse one's mind completely in loving kindness, immersing one's mind completely in metta, and then recognize that the metta, that feeling of loving kindness, is itself constantly changing. It is itself impermanent. And that through that, one can recognize that all things are also impermanent. So when the mind is completely fixated on loving kindness to where it's not doing anything else, and then one recognizes that loving kindness itself is also impermanent and constantly changing, then that can be a way of directing the mind towards letting go, towards awakening. Yeah, go ahead.
Bhante Sumita, you said Kusa Getami was named as the foremost bhikkhuni who wore the coarse robe. What does that mean?
So, like she was wearing very, like those days, the practitioners in the wilderness, they were living in the forest. So the clothes they were wearing, like sometimes they were wearing some very coarse clothes, like the dead bodies were wrapped. So they used to take those clothes and then use those natural herbs to detox or something, and they used those things. And Kisa Gautami had such a simple life, and she did not want to wear like very comfortable clothes or something. That was her, um, her, her simplicity. Yeah, practice of simplicity, and she did not want to do that. Even Venerable Mahakassapa was somebody like that. There, it is said like Dhutangadari. Dhutangadaris are very strong practitioners of simplicity. They would be away from all the other comfortable things in their life. They would not have those things. They would practice very strong, simple lifestyles. So she had some clothes like that.
And it's said that Kisa Gotami also practiced many other ascetic practices. So when I see that she was the foremost in wearing coarse robes, I also take that as a reminder of the other ascetic practices, like eating only once a day, having only one set of robes, and so on. So optional extra practices that monastics sometimes take on. She was said to have been a devotee of those austere practices. So Rick asks, could you speak to the relationship of how our craving for becoming relates to the suffering we experience when we develop a direct experience of impermanence, change, and loss? So how our craving for becoming relates to the suffering that comes from directly experiencing impermanence.
Yeah, so we want things to be a certain way. We want ourselves to be a certain way. We want the world to be a certain way. So it is this desire, this attachment, this clinging, this wanting to be not only external things, but ourselves. We have certain ideas about ourselves that bring about all this suffering. So in any way that we try to grasp onto anything, be it in ourselves or outside or ideas or anything, I mean, it's gonna directly lead us to more suffering. And it is that wanting things to be that conditions bhava, which is existence or being. And this is a process that's always happening. So when we look at paticca samuppada and when we look at 12 links, or however, sometimes you find a different number of links in the suttas, you see that it's a cycle. And that in itself, when you see the cycle, you see change. So you see that this is always happening. I know that it's also presented as like a 3 lifetime kind of scheme, but at the same time, it's also instantaneous or spontaneous cycle that's happening at the smallest discernible unit of experience. And this is the what I feel is like the real what you really want to get to. What you really want to get to when you're thinking about impermanence, seeing this process of paticca samuppada.
And Daniel Sullivan asks, how does impermanence relate to non-self? One way to relate this is first ask yourself, what do I think of as me? What do I think of as myself? And whatever it is, pay close attention to it and see if it's changing or not. And if it's changing, then that means it can't possibly be you. So look at it this way. Like, if you think, my clothes are myself. Well, right now you're wearing that set of clothing, so it's not too ridiculous to say that. It's pretty ridiculous, but it's not too ridiculous. But then when you go to bed, you might take these clothes off, and then tomorrow you put on a different set of clothes. So something's changed. Your clothes have changed. So maybe yesterday you thought your clothes were yourself, but today you have a different set of clothes. So clothing can't possibly be yourself. Or your hair. You think, oh, my hair is myself. But then you go and you get a haircut. And well, yourself is now lying on the floor. And then it gets fucked up and yourself gets dumped in the trash and decomposes into the soil. So clearly hair is not yourself. Fingernails. Are fingernails yourself? Well, I just trimmed my fingernails yesterday, and so clearly my fingernails were not myself because now they're in a trash can. Actually, a trash can in Virginia, so very far away from the monastery. So pretty clear that wasn't myself. And so you can go through everything in your body, actually, because everything in your body is constantly changing. So if everything in the body is constantly changing, then that means if we say, my body right now is myself, well, if you just wait a few moments, then your body has changed. The body that you identified as yourself doesn't exist anymore. There's a different body, which might be somewhat similar to the one you had a few moments ago, but it's different. Therefore, it can't possibly be you. And even more so with the mind. What's going on in the mind? One moment you're angry. Is anger yourself? Is that who you really are? Are you the angry person? Are you anger? Is that you? Well, you wait a few moments and you get distracted and you forget about your anger and the anger goes away. And yet there's still some sense of self, which clearly doesn't have anything to do with anger. So clearly anger wasn't you. Or what is it? Maybe it's your preferences or your ideas. Well, those also change. So that also can't possibly be you. One day you think, oh, I'm the person who likes chocolate. But then a few years later, you realize that you actually don't like chocolate anymore. As strange as that might sound, apparently this happens to people from time to time. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you really can't stand cilantro, and then a few years later you eat something with cilantro in it and you find you're actually enjoying the experience. So clearly you are not the person who hates cilantro or the person who likes chocolate, because these things change. So then you look deeper at the mind and you're like, well, then who am I? What is it that defines myself? And is it permanent or is it impermanent? Remember, even consciousness is not permanent because consciousness is changing. Actually, you wake up in the morning, a moment ago you were not conscious, and now you're conscious. It's like, oh, consciousness has arisen. Consciousness hates the alarm clock. Consciousness wants to go back to unconsciousness. But then you get up because you're in a monastery and that's what you have to do. And you stumble your way down to the tea room and drink tea because that's the only way you're going to survive morning puja. And your consciousness changes. As the tea starts to settle in, then your consciousness becomes sharp and bright and clear. Not like that fuzzy, irritated consciousness which was pounding the alarm clock a few minutes ago. So consciousness is also not self. And then in the evening you lie down and you fall asleep and consciousness disappears again. And then it appears in a dream where consciousness is very muddled and vague and confused. So a different state of consciousness entirely. And then it disappears again. So consciousness is constantly changing. Therefore, that can't possibly be ourself either. So in this way, you can eventually come to the realization that all things within experience are changing. And yet there is a sense of self which is independent of any particular object. That means that those objects cannot possibly be who we really are. They can only be considered to be temporary phenomena that appear when the conditions are right and disappear when those conditions change. But they cannot be who we really are. They cannot be our true self. They cannot be our true nature. So in this way, impermanence is a way of coming to understand a not self. Contemplating impermanence is a way of coming to perceive not self. Which is why there are many suttas where the Buddha says that perceiving impermanence is a direct path to enlightenment. The reason for that is because when you perceive impermanence, then you will also start to realize not self. When you see that things are impermanent, you will start to see that that means they can't possibly be who you are. And you'll come to realize that all things are impermanent, which means that nothing whatsoever is me or mine. And that moment is when you will attain awakening. Venerables, do you have anything you'd like to add on this subject?
I remember there was a question about loving kindness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Dulani was asking.
Yes. Do you want to talk a bit more on that?
In Dhammapada, there is a stanza, I think it is number 6, Yamakavagga, twin verses. Parechana vijananti mayametha yamamase yecha tattha vijananti tato sammanti medaga. People fight. People keep fighting with each other, because thinking that they are like permanent, but those people who know that they are not permanent, they are going to die one day, they will not fight anymore. But there's no point. So I think thinking that we can also radiate loving kindness, because there's no point in fighting. And if you have anger, again, there is no point in finding a way to revenge. because your life is not permanent too. And what is the point? And in the Dhammapada again, the fourth stanza or the fifth one, I think, it says, Nahi verena verani sammanti dhakudachanam averena cha sammanti esa dhammo sanantano. Hatred is never appeased by hatred alone. And by non-hatred alone, one can appease the hatred. This is an eternal law. So thinking that we also have to radiate loving kindness. There's no point in continuing with your revenge or anger with anyone. So thinking of impermanence, I think it's really useful. You can use it for anything to practice your Dhamma.
Okay.
And a person named No Identity, which is a very Buddhist name, says, is there a correlation between impermanence and sunyata? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So sunyata is emptiness. So one way of talking about emptiness is that nothing whatsoever has any lasting essence to it. One way of talking about emptiness is that all things are insubstantial, like a lump of foam. So this is one of the similes the Buddha uses, which I've always found communicates the concept of emptiness very clearly. So the Buddha said that physical objects are like lumps of foam. So a lump of foam is something that a foolish person might think is solid and substantial and real. But if you go and you pay closer attention to it, you'll realize that there's not really anything there. It looks like a solid object, but there's not really anything there. There's only the appearance of solidity. But in actuality, it's completely insubstantial. So the Buddha said all physical phenomena are like this. Our body is like this. Everything is like this. It's like a lump of foam. It looks like a substantial, solid, real object, but in actuality, it's completely hollow and empty. There's not anything there. So impermanence, when we notice the constant change of all things, then we recognize that there is no unchanging essence to anything. And we also recognize that nothing has any lasting reality to it. So all phenomena are like flashes of lightning. This is another metaphor the Buddha used. It's like a flash of lightning in an empty sky. So just like that, there seems to be something there and then it's gone. And while it's there, look more closely at it. What is it really? And you'll see it's like a lump of foam. It's insubstantial, it's hollow. So in this way, through contemplating impermanence, you can start to get a sense of emptiness. You can start to get, your perception of things changes. You start to recognize that the arising of something cannot be pieced apart from its cessation. The Buddha said, Yankenchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha dhammang. So all things that are of the nature to arise, all things that have the arising nature also have the ceasing nature. In other words, things are, their nature is both to appear to exist and also to disappear. And this also brings us to the Kachanagota Sutta, which we chant here every day, where the Buddha says that things cannot be described either as existing or as not existing. It's only when you don't know the arising of things that you think that things cannot exist. And it's only when you don't know the ceasing of things that you think that things exist. So observing arising and ceasing, as I mentioned earlier, is one way of practicing the perception of impermanence. And it's also a way of recognizing that phenomena cannot be spoken of in terms of existing or not existing, which is emptiness. So the same practice brings you to both. Those are my thoughts on the matter anyway. Bhante Sumita?
I like to give him a name. Anamika. Anamika or Nirnamika, no name. Yeah.
Actually, we have some more questions coming in as well. So Tan Geng, who was just here very recently, so one of our monk friends, Tan Geng says, can you talk about Ida Pachayata related to impermanence? Bhante Sumita?
Idapacheta is like
When this exists, that exists. When this arises, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not exist. When this ceases, that ceases. I don't remember the Pali off the top of my head.
I think we were discussing about that also, right? Like in Paticcasamuppada, we also say avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vijnana, and then that with the avijja or the ignorance, the sankhara happens, and with the sankhara, the vijnana happens, and with the vijnana namarupa, and namarupa, from namarupa to salayatana, the 6 sense faculties, and then it goes on to namarupa, and then vedana, and then tanha, then the upadana, and then the bhava, the existence. And because of bhava, jati, the birth happens. And because of birth, all the related sufferings happen, right? Because of the birth, you have the pain. You see, you have the sickness. You have all kinds of sufferings happening because of the birth. And then the opposite. When there is no avijja, no sankhara. No sankhara, no vijnana. When there is no vijnana, no namarupa, no salayatana, no tanha, no upadana, and then no bhava. And then there is no jati, the birth. When there is no birth, no other suffering, no sickness, no decaying, not even death. So I think Itapacheta should be related to momentary, like every single moment, the impermanence that is happening in us. It's very important to practice in meditation. It's very useful. Like as I said, when we practice the Anapanasati, for example, we can see the breath itself is suffering. I mean, it's not permanent. We can hold on to the breath like for how long we can. It changes, right? And look at our wings, we change, right? And every single thing in our body, we have some signs, like we wake up in the morning and then we sleep in the night. That is also like temporary death, right? And when we wink, we close our eyes, it is dark. Open our eyes, it is light. It is like death and birth. And then every single time we breathe in and breathe out, you never know what will be our last breath. So these are constant reminders to us that life is impermanent, subject to death. And I think it is really important for us to think. And in meditation, if you think, my hair, like kesa, loma, naka, danta, tacho, all these body objects like the hair, impermanent. And then loma, the body hair, impermanent. And then it's not mine, it's not me, it's impermanent. And then naka, the Bhante said, the nails, impermanent, right? You want to have like duplicate nails and also maybe like different colors. to make it like more duplicate, but it's impermanent again. And no matter how much we try, we can't really, um, change it. We can make it permanent. It's changing forever. It's changing all the time. Danta, the teeth, teeth also is impermanent. So it's constant changing that is happening in us. And this is what is all about, I think, here in Idapacheta, uh, uh, relation to impermanence.
You had a question?
Yes, Bhante, I have a question. I once heard a friend of mine tell me that the Buddha told Ananda that if he had asked him to live 1,000 years, he could have stayed for 1,000 years. Is that true?
It's in the Digha Nikaya, isn't it?
In Mahaparinibbana Sutta, I think.
Yeah.
It is said when the Mara was Mara was always trying to get rid of the Buddha, even after his enlightenment, he was always trying to interfere him. And it is said when he was 80 something, he came again to the Buddha. And Venerable Ananda, Buddha said actually, Venerable Ananda, if you ask me to live for 100,000 years, I could do that. If it is necessary, I could do that. And then it is said Mara possessed him. He could not actually ask that request from the Buddha, it is said. And so he came and asked the Buddha instead, Mara himself. Now you have all the Dhamma established, Mahasangha, everything. Now I think it is time for you to die. So Buddha also realized everything, whatever he wanted to teach the world, he had taught. So it is time for him to give up. And then it is said, Ayu Sankhara, when he decides, like within 3 months' time, I'm going to die. And that's how it happened. Interestingly, when it is said the Buddhas, they had that amazing magical power, like in their meditation, they could recover those decaying cells when they meditate. So they could look younger forever. But the moment they give up, like I'm going to die within 3 months, like then they show all kinds of decaying. Then he had the body like wrinkling, and he used to say, my body is like an old cart, old carriage. And he had he shown some signs of decay towards the latter part of his life. Yeah. That
Yes, thank you.
And maybe we'll take one more topic, and the rest we can save for monk chat tomorrow evening. Dulani asks, is everything in life an illusion due to impermanence? Bhante Sanata Vihari, would you like to comment on this one?
I'd say it's illusionary. So, if by illusion we mean appearance, then yes, it's just these are just appearances. They're not necessarily objective, fundamental representations of whatever's happening. They're just constructions, ways that these, as Bhante was saying earlier, these sensations are being constructed into some sort of experience in the mind. And the other part, what was it, Bhante? About
is everything in life an illusion due to impermanence?
Yeah, so we can think about a movie, like a stream. So like you just see all these images and it looks like there's someone there talking and there's something going on. But you see that there's nothing really there, it's just a projection. And the reason the movie works is because it keeps moving. It keeps projecting different images and it makes you think that there's something static there where there isn't anything there. It's just a series of constant, light changing all the time. So in a similar way, the mind creates images, auditory images, taste images, and all kinds of different images. Even thoughts are mental images, and since we don't notice the gap in between these things, we think it's kind of like a movie, like, oh yeah, like there's a solid image there. But if we were able to perceive slower, you were in a movie theater, then you would cease to see the movie, and you would just see still frames, piece by piece. So in a similar way, if you were able to calm your mind to that level, then you would also be able to perceive impermanence. You'd be able to see the gaps in between all these different units of mental experience. So because we're not able to see these things, it does create this illusion or appearance of permanence in the impermanence.
Yeah, I would also add to that it's important that we not, when we talk about things being illusions or illusionary, it's important that we not make the mistake of saying that they don't exist. So it's a mistake to either say that things exist or to say that they don't exist. Either one is a mistake. So if you want to say that things are illusions, well, an illusion still has a certain reality of its own. It's just not the reality that we think it is. Again, the imagery of a movie is actually quite apt, as Bhante Sanata Bahari was saying, because it's not that there's nothing there. There actually is something there. We're just not understanding it clearly. And also, when you're watching a movie, you can get very swept up in it, very involved in it. When the character you like experiences pain or sadness, then you'll experience sadness. You'll get agitated and upset when your favorite character in the movie gets injured or experiences loss. And then when your favorite character experiences triumph, then you're happy and you're filled with joy. You're like, yes, they got that thing they wanted, and so then you're swept right along with it. Well, it's actually the same thing. Because we don't understand the nature of reality, then we're getting swept up in pain and suffering about things which ultimately are not really important. And we get lost in attachment and craving for things which are not really important. Just as, I mean, it's just silly if someone is like, oh, I'm so depressed because a fictional character in a fictional movie got fictionally killed. It's like, well, who the heck cares? Let's just be perfectly honest here. Why are you making yourself suffer over a fictional character in a fictional movie? It's like, what's the big deal? In the same way, we take our life much too seriously. The things that are happening, they're happening due to causes and conditions, but they're not happening to us because there is no us for it to happen to in the first place. So we don't need to take it so seriously. But we still need to be careful because we can make choices that lead to wisdom or choices that lead to delusion. We can make choices that lead to happiness or choices that lead to further suffering and confusion. This is the danger. If we say everything is an illusion, then sometimes that means that people then think, oh, well, then my choices don't matter. And they start making bad choices. So you can say that everything is an illusion. You can say that if you want to, as long as we're careful to understand it in this way. And we're almost out of time. Any final comments before we close for the evening?
I remember there was an Indian actor. He was very, very famous and people loved him so much. And one time he was acting on a moving train. And on the top of the moving train, there was a dancing event. And one girl who was a hardcore fan of that actor, she was so worried, thinking that he might fall down, But, yeah, like your favorite actors, I think if you are a real practitioner, like meditator, it's difficult to enjoy such movies because it's like not real. You have to be an integral part of that movie. Yes, I'm there. This is me that is acting. Then you can enjoy that to a certain extent. I also would like to say sometime maybe that question was also related to that little girl's explanation that last time I explained about that. She how we think like everything is real, but it is not real. For example, we have three times: past, present, and future. Right? So whatever happened in the past, it's gone. It's like a dream. Like moments ago, we were having tea. It's like a dream. It's like a memory. It's no more real anymore. And then whatever happens now in the future, tomorrow, we don't know. It's again not real. We just think it's real, but it has not yet come. And then even the present, um, like whatever in the back of you, um, you have, for example, in the back of me, there is a Buddha statue and there is a window, a wall. I know that, but it is my memory, the memory that has registered in me. So I know there is from before, from my teachers, from my friends, and from my parents. I have learned about these things. There is something called wall. There is something called statue. There is something called this and that. So that is my knowledge. That is my memory. Not really real. Now I can't even see that. It's my former memory that gives me a projection. There is something here. And then in front of me, you all are there. But then we also think you all are there again subject to change, like the four elements. Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo, the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air. So these are the four elements that all of us have. So thinking that if we say, it's like everything is a dream. Whatever we see may be an illusion, maybe a delusion, maybe a dream. So I think it's important also to know about that a little bit so that our meditation can be much stronger.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. And we're out of time, so thank you all for joining in. If you have any lingering questions, please write them down and bring them to Monk Chat tomorrow evening. I saw a couple very interesting questions, which I hope you'll share with us again tomorrow evening when we have time to discuss them. For now, we can end the evening with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.